Ta'anit, corresponding to the 9th day of July 2020. We dedicate today's class Refuah Shelema Abraham Yoel ben Devora Chaya, as well as Refuah Shelema of a wonderful local rabbi that unfortunately is affected by the condition, by the name of Rabbi Aharon Mas'ud ben Sulika. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu give Refuah Shelema to him and everybody else affected by this among the Cholim of all of Am Yisrael. Amen. Being the day of the 17th day of Tammuz, definitely we come across the many unfortunate events that we started to mention yesterday, starting with the one incident of the Egel, of the sin of the golden calf. Our rabbis tell us that every time that we come across the time of the tragedy that affects Am Yisrael, although the fact that we're still fasting, it's a sign that we still are in exile. But parallel to that, we also have an opportunity that the day itself reverses into a day of salvation and redemption. And if this is applicable in every time of the year or any day of the year, when it comes to the Shiva Asar V'Tamuz, this is even more enhanced due to the fact that the number 17, which is Shiva Asar, stands for the word good. The goodness will come out of this particular day. Yes, we remember, as we said in the prayers earlier today, in the extended Selihot or Tahanunim, about the burning of the Torah, placing of an idol in the Bet HaMikdash, the breaking of the Luchot, which, if you look in Rashi, in Perashat Ki Tisa, which is the description or the Perashat that Torah describes at great detail what happened with the Egel, we come across a very interesting agreement, so to speak, that the Almighty made with Moshe Rabbeinu, that instead of activating the attribute of judgment that time and that day, which probably the consequences could have been catastrophic, God forbid, Hashem made an agreement with Moshe Rabbeinu that God will dilute the consequence of that act against God, literally of idolatry, until today, according to the commentary of Rashi, we are paying the price for that tragedy. Now you may say, but Rabbi, come on, when do you finish paying the mortgage? It's a good question. It's a good question. So I can give you a few answers. Number one, the payment that we need to do, it's minuscule if we separate when did the sin of the golden calf happen, over 3,300 years ago, and we're still paying for it. And Rashi says every time that there is a certain type of hardship or affliction or tragedy for the Jewish people, always carries a small percentage of the atonement for the sin of the golden calf. Imagine yourself, if you take out a mortgage for 30 years, what type of payment do you have? And if you take out a mortgage for 3,300 years, how smaller the payment will be? Something very small and almost unnoticeable. Our rabbis tell us that this is part of the kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that even in the face of adversity, Borei Olam remembers that He is our Father and He is our King. the way we find in the prayer book, Avinu Malkenu, our Father, our King. The concept of idolatry today, compared to the way it used to be in the past, most likely 90% is gone. There are a couple of areas in the world that idolatry perhaps may still be performed by people. But we know very well that today's idolatry does not have the power like it used to have earlier in human history. Thanks to the rabbis in the Talmud, through a special, let's call it a Kabbalistic type of ceremony or procedure, they were able to deflate, so to speak, the power of idolatry, and it was minimized tremendously. And with this, we are able to understand what was the idea of placing an idol in the Hechal, in the Bet HaMikdash, or what was the idea, regretfully, that many Jewish kings were involved in idolatry, the way we understand from the story of Pinchas and Eliyahu and Navi, Pinchas and Eliyahu. Pinchas and Eliyahu are the same. And if you remember how in the story of Eliyahu and Navi in the book of Menachem, there we learn about a king, Ahav, and his wife Izebel, that she was greater than him in idolatry. And I believe that according to the Mekubalim, Izebel, the reason why she prosecuted and chased after Eliyahu and Navi, because Eliyahu and Navi was the soul of Pinchas. And this lady, Izebel, was the soul of Kozbi Batsur, the one executed by Pinchas in the Perashah, at the end of Perashat Balak, which is a continuation of Perashat, which Perashat Pinchas rather is the continuation of Perashat Balak. So we need to understand that even though these tragedies happened many years back, but we still are affected by it. But you may ask, but where is Avodah Zarah today? Where do we get idolatry today? So you'll be surprised at the answer. And the answer is simple. There are many ways of doing Avodah Zarah. Many ways that a person worships. Sometimes people worship professional players. Sometimes people worship other humans. And when I say worship, doesn't mean that you bow down to them. Although today there is a concept of white people kissing the boots of other humans. And I'm sorry to bring this up, but it only shows what's going on in our society. And the more challenging the society becomes, the more our Torah reinforcement of way of living and way of being needs to be reinforced as well. So anger, we already know this, it's definitely like an agent of idolatry. This is what the Zohar Kadosh writes. For those who were following the class yesterday, we talk about the topic of vitur, how the person should concede, how a person should be easygoing, how a person should move to the side to enable someone else to have the final word or to say a statement, whatever that means. Today we go to the other extreme. Today we go to the topic of anger. And Kol HaKo'es, the Gemara writes, כאילו עובד עבודה זרה. God forbid, a person that gets angry, and again, there are many levels, but sometimes you hear words or comments that people make, and then you ask yourself, what's going on? I saw him in the shul earlier today, and now in the middle of the business day, he's acting like the Incredible Hulk, Haz v'shalom. So part of the ta'anit, the way it says clearly, I have it here, in the Sefer HaToda'ah, and he quotes different sources describing that the purpose of the ta'anit, that today, due to the current virus situation that we have worldwide, many guidelines were added of exempting people of fasting, who can fast, who should fast, who is not allowed to fast, etc. And I believe that I did mention this yesterday. Check with your local rabbi concerning your own particular condition in the event that you need to ask this type of question. But the Ramban, Nachmanides, trains us of how to learn, how to be calm, how to be kind, how to be humble, and stay away from anger. Now, with that being said, I'd like to share an interesting introduction to the Zohar of today from Perashat Pinchas. This topic that the Zohar talks about, it is not a new topic. I believe that we went through this back in the beginning of Sefer Bereshit, yani 40 weeks ago, give or take. So since some of us may not remember that class exactly, so we have the opportunity today to review some of the situations in life that a person must avoid at all times. Nothing to do with the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, but it has to do with the Zohar today. So the Zohar explains the topic of cursing. But the cursing that the Zohar is talking today is not, God forbid, the prohibition of cursing another person, but it's get even better, the prohibition of a person cursing themselves. And I do know that to some of us, some of these topics may be a bit delicate or a bit sensitive and perhaps should not be spoken publicly, but I don't really agree with that. I agree that perhaps we need to talk more on these topics of self-improvement, because at the end of the day, part of the remedy to the usual fasting and a lot of the things that are going around our lives is to understand the need to change, to understand the need of self-improvement. This happens to be the suggestion of the Zohar of today. And the Zohar says, the person that curses themselves, God forbid, their words don't go to the waste basket, the Zohar says. The words of the person that being captured by the malach that is connected to us, so to speak, and the malachim that are connected to us additionally, they are answering Amen after the words that were said by this particular person. And the words elevate themselves and they remain suspended in the air, and there is a malach in charge of executing that curse. Now, I know and I recognize that this topic is very heavy. Rabbi, what are you talking about? Angels, an angel supervisor, an agent, an angel that is my handler, so to speak, or my concierge of fulfilling my wishes and my requests. And then you tell me that there is a group of angels saying amen to everything that I say. And there is another angel who loves to execute wishes, especially the negative ones. And interesting enough, the Zohar, I use the word kelala, which in English means a curse. But let's see what the Zohar considers, that's a word, a threat or a curse. Let's see. The Zohar says, Re'aya mi Moshe Rabbeinu. Who do the Zohar uses as an example of what not to do? Moshe Rabbeinu, the one and only, the most humble man on the face of the earth, the one that God testified about him. Great man, Isha Elokim, a godly man. And the Zohar says, true, all of the above is true. But listen to what Moshe Rabbeinu said, related to today's situation of the Egel, Perasha Kitisa. When the whole disaster of the Egel happened, what was God's original reaction? I'm getting rid of the Jewish people. I bring you a mashal. I hope that no one is involved in the following mashal and no one is planning to act in this inappropriate way. But imagine yourself, you are married, and then you tell your wife, or God forbid, your wife tells you, the husband, I'm going on a date. Can you imagine that? God forbid. And I know that it sounds a bit dramatic, but that's the intention. So multiply that 1,000 times more when the Jewish people, under the influence of the Erev Rav, wanted to divorce themselves from the Almighty and worship an animal made out of gold. Tragic. So how do you think that God felt? How do you think that God felt? Divorce, God wanted. He says, let me get rid of the Jewish people. Let me start a brand new nation with good disciplinary rules and regulations, people that will be loyal to the Almighty and will not cross their mind to ignore me, God says. Moshe Rabbeinu says, unacceptable. If you're going to do that, Moshe says, Meheni na misifrecha asher katavta. Erase my name. Meheni na, please erase me from the Sefer Torah. And we know the outcome. The Talmud writes in Gemara Makot, Kelala shel hacham afilu al tenai ba'a. Kelala, a curse. But I will tell you what scares me on this statement. I ask you a question. Did Moshe order a curse? Of course not. What did he say to God? If you're not going to forgive the Jewish people, Mehenina, erase my name. I have nothing to do with you. That was your decision. I'm out of the picture. I'm out of here, the way they say in America. And yet the Talmud says that this is called a kelala, a curse. Let's translate the Talmud in Makot. Kelala shel hacham, a negative statement or a curse by a sage, by a hacham, even that is conditional, it has the power of becoming activated. Imagine yourself that I take a sentence, you send me an email, and I take a sentence and I cut part of the beginning, cut part of the end, and then I have the center that says completely the opposite, what the part in the beginning is missing and at the end of the end is missing. Meaning to say, I can copy and paste from something positive to something negative. And this is what the Talmud says, that the statement of Moshe Rabbeinu was conditional. Moshe Rabbeinu says, if you are not going to forgive the Jewish people, erase my name. What did God do? Deleted all the beginning of the sentence and only left hanging, erase my name. This is the will of Moshe. You want your name to be erased? Perashat Tesaveh does not have the name of Moshe. And you say, right, Rabbi, that's not fair. You're missing half of the other sentence. That is the Hidush of the Gemara in Makot. And this is the Hidush what the Zohar Kadosh is telling us today. Don't minimize the value of your words. Sometimes people get upset and say things and say comments that they don't understand the power of their speech, the power of the tongue. And the Zohar Kadosh writes and it says, that this is something that people cannot ignore. Cannot ignore. And I know that it's not the happiest topic to talk about, but today is a fast day. What am I speaking about? Sa'udah Mitzvah. Today is Sa'udah Mitzvah at night. Break the fast whenever you finish. For Miami, it's 8:38 in the evening. Be'ezat Hashem. Other places could be a bit different, so each person should follow their schedule accordingly. So remember, yesterday I mentioned the introduction of the Ben Ish Chai. What was the message of the Ben Ish Chai? That the mouth of the person can be our connector with Hashem, Olat Tamid, that the person through the proper speech can elevate themselves higher to the Almighty in a good way, or God forbid, the power of the speech becomes the biggest weapon of the Yetzer Hara. And usually people that have short-tempered or get upset very easily, they probably have an issue with this topic. And it's not a criticism, but it's a fact. And that's why the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot tells us, always be kashe lichos, benoach lirsot. Be difficult to get angry and easy to forgive and forget, which is continuation of yesterday's topic, to be mevater. Let it go. Let it go. Move on. Turn on the page. Begin a new chapter. Now, number 2. The Zohar says, what else is detrimental to the person? It says, very simple, המזלזל באוכלים או בפירורי לחם. A person that mistreats food or steps on crumbs of bread. The way we understand the crumbs of bread, it means, number one, that if a person needs to dispose of bread, should break them into very small pieces. Our custom, and maybe this is a man-made custom, what's the tradition if bread falls on the floor? People pick it up and they kiss it. Now, today, kissing may be limited, obviously, for obvious health reasons. But why do we kiss the bread? And there are people who actually kiss the bread, and there are people that in Pesach kiss the matzah to show the love to the mitzvah. Hibuv mitzvah, the halacha calls it. But we understand that lechem, bread, it's something very special. The man, it's called lechem min hashamayim. Hamosi lechem min haaretz, which is, by the way, one of the topics that the Ben Ish Hai speaks about also in Perashat Pinchas. Why don't we say Hamosi lechem min ha'adama? Why do we say Hamosi lechem min haaretz? So the Ben Ish Hai explains that aretz is a greater word for earth than adama. Adama, it's lower. Eretz or aretz, it's higher. Where do we learn that from? From Perashat Bereshit. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. Beyom berot Hashem Elokim eretz b'shamayim. The Ben Ish Hai says, in Perashat Bereshit also, we find Hashem's name and eretz, the earth. And when you make the Hamosi, we use 10 fingers connecting to the 10 Sefirot, the 10 godly illuminations of holiness that affects and benefits our soul, our body, and our mind. And there are 10 steps required from the moment that the seeds are planted until the bread comes to the table of the person. That is the reason why the Berachot HaMotzi contain 10 words. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam hamosi lechem min haaretz. All the food matters. Bore peri adama, bore minei mezonot, bore peri gefen, shakol yavid baro. 9. Bread, 10. Representing the 10 fingers, the 10 sefirot, the 10 steps, and many other holy matters that the Ben Ish Hai discusses. Look, just from one word, we are able to determine the level of holiness. Not only that, he adds one more thing, and it says, Eretz Lashon Ratzon, the goodwill of the person to connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Zohar Kadosh writes, and it says that a person needs to be careful with this. You know, there are many interesting traditions concerning the breadcrumbs. In the Hasidic world, and I've seen it with my own eyes, they eat the breadcrumbs after they finish the first half of the Shabbat meal. They gather all the crumbs, they put them in a spoon and they eat it. Or they put it into the soup, or into the meal, or into the salad. Why? For this Zohar. Because being careful of not stepping or getting rid of breadcrumbs or bigger pieces of bread keeps away poverty from the person. I believe it says in the Moed Kol Hai, I'm 90% on that, could be a different source, that says that when a person picks up the breadcrumbs, it creates a spiritual reaction that the drops of zera that a person, God forbid, may have wasted through life, by this action of eating the breadcrumbs, it also picks up the drops and restores them where they belong spiritually. Maybe Rabbi Nachman of Breslev may write such a thing. I'm debating between these two sources. But I saw it in writing, and it was fascinating that something so simple and something so common, we have a whole revolution spiritually that can keep away poverty from the person. Third, running away from Shabbat. Making Havdalah before Shabbat ends. And this is a topic relevant to Shabbat Kodesh, but I think that we understand the message. Don't think for a moment that our actions don't create a reaction. King David HaMelech, alav shalom, writes in the book of Tehillim, chapter 121, and it says, Hashem silecha al yad yaminecha. God is the shadow with the person on the right hand. Whatever we do, there is a heavenly reaction to it. If the action is good, Be'ezat Hashem, the reaction will be good. But if the action is not good, God forbid, the reaction may not be good. And the Zohar Kadosh expands a bit better and more on the concept of the three cases. David HaMelech, the Zohar adds one more, and it says, Amarti, chapter 39, I say, Eshmera derachai mechato bilshoni, I will protect myself of sinning through my tongue. Eshmera lefi mahsom, I will protect my mouth with a muzzle. Muzzle is what many times animals have, not to bite, God forbid, or even not to eat while they are plowing, which is actually a prohibition from the Torah. Lo tahsom shor bedisho. You're not allowed to cover the mouth of the animal while they are working on the field. Why not? Short answer. Number one, sa'ar ba'alei haim. You're causing the animal to suffer because the animal is seeing what's there and he wants to eat something. Number one. Number two, hakarat tov. You need to be grateful even to the animal. And that's why the Torah says, your animal is working for you for free on the field, let him eat. He's not going to eat more than he's going to help you in the field. Now, the Zohar Kadosh also talks about that it's not limited only to the concept of bread, but it's also connected to the concept of food. That a person needs to be respectful when we dispose of food. Which, Baruch Hashem, I believe that people today, that we have garbage bags and we have garbage containers and disposable stuff, it's easy to be careful. But perhaps in the olden days, this may have been an issue, but that doesn't mean that doesn't apply today, especially when it comes to the concept of bread. The Zohar Kadosh explains additionally on the concept of the Shabbat. The way we understand what the Zohar Kadosh explains, the Shabbat Kodesh element of judgment goes to a recess, meaning to say that Shamayim, in the zechut of our observance of Shabbat, delays the reactivation of the heavenly judgment, which is something fascinating. You're going to tell me that because I'm observing Shabbat on a timely manner at the end especially, and I don't run away from the Shabbat, but I wait till the Shabbat finishes, and I even add a few minutes, which I believe that everybody does after tefillah in the synagogue. Shamayim says, because you still are on Shabbat mode, the judgment in the heavens will not be activated. I ask you a question. Many times you hear me, my opening statement in the class that says, today's class has been sponsored, or today's class is being dedicated for the Refuah Shlema, as we mentioned before, Avraham Yoel ben Boshachaya and Rabbi Aharon Mas'ud ben Sulika. Okay? These are good reasons. But can you imagine in Shamayim they announce, and that's what the Zohar Kadosh writes, in Shamayim they announce, or they put a sign that says, fire of Gehinnom for this week has been sponsored by, I'll tell you one thing, you don't want to have your name there. Like you don't want to have your name in a tombstone, because it means that, God forbid, the person is no longer alive. We don't want to be the sponsors of the activation of fire. The Zohar says, you know how the premature fire of judgment, and when I use fire means in a spiritual level, how does it become activated? When, God forbid, the person ignites the fire of Avdalah before the Shabbat actually coming to an end. Very powerful statement of the Zohar. Very powerful. That because of a person finishing Shabbat early, this is the situation that is happening in the heavenly spheres. And therefore, the Zohar Kadosh writes, and it says, a person should not be negligent in the three messages of today. Don't curse, and if cursing others is forbidden and a Torah transgression, cursing yourself also, God forbid. Do not mistreat food, especially bread. If you need to dispose of bread, do it respectfully. You can give it to the birds, give it to the fish, or put it in a bag, but break the pieces to be less than an ounce. And if you see bread in the floor, pick it up. And don't be afraid of eating the breadcrumbs, especially if they're crunchy, they're delicious. And the third one, don't run away from the Shabbat. Wait till the Shabbat finishes and then proceed with the Avdalah and everything else. My good friends, if from the many that are listening or watching this class, one person takes upon themselves to be careful in the three items that we mentioned before, the class was worth it. Not all the classes will have a lot of fascinating things, a lot of reincarnation topics, which is a given in this week's Torah portion between Zimri ben Salu and Pinchas and Eliyahu and Korah and Yitro and Cain and Rabbi Akiva. I already gave it to you. That's the dessert for today. All these names are connected to this parasha. Beli Neder Shabbat afternoon will try to talk about it. Beli Neder. Maybe tomorrow I'll give you a sample, which I believe I gave you before, between Eliyahu and Navi, Pinchas, Izebel, Ahav, etc. But we cannot miss the point. Like the repetition year after year of a ta'anit is for self-improvement, maybe this is an area where we need to work on. As a rabbi, and many of you know me for many years, we don't do only weddings. We deal sometimes with challenging situations in marriage that is more difficult than challenges of parnasa. Challenges of parnasa are easier to handle than challenges in the marriage or challenges in the world of dispute. And a large majority of the scenarios, if anger will not be there, not only the problem will not exist, but the people's marriage will flourish. Now you may say, but Rabbi, everybody gets angry. I will tell you that's not accurate. Sure, that everybody occasionally gets angry, maybe, but there are people, regretfully, that anger may be the middle name. And the anger, as I said yesterday, is connected to criticism and complaining and unhappiness. All are part of the same group of problematic situations that, God forbid, may affect the life of the person in a very adverse and negative way. But don't despair. You can pray for salvation in this topic. You should read the letter of the Nachmanides every day. Takes you less than 5 minutes. And today is available in all languages. And the merit of reading that is because he spells out the grave dangers of anger. And at the end, he gives you a suggestion. Read it, check it out, and Be'ezat Hashem, you will see changes. May not necessarily be overnight, but the changes will be forthcoming, providing that we put our mind and our true desire, as King David says, Eshmera darchi mehato o derachai mehato bilshoni. Eshmera is praise to the Almighty. God, help me. Help me. Help me to control myself. Guess what? Your name does not need to be David. And your name, or you don't need to be a male. You're a human being that carries the essence of Hashem in our life. And that is the reason why the Zohar Kadosh elsewhere writes that when there is anger, God forbid, Hashem's holiness of the soul leaves the body. So how does a person remains alive? That will be a question. Excellent question, by the way. The Zohar says we bring a backup. We bring a refurbished soul. And that what enters into the life of the person. And the refurbished soul, so to speak, carries a cloud of darkness. Why? Because God cannot stand anger. God despises the drunk. God despises the angry person. And God despises the one who lies or the one that scoffs people, belittles people. All these are interesting, Ben Adam Lahavero, interpersonal relationship. And I'm sorry to speak about this today, in a day of a Ta'anit, but guess what? Ta'anit is all about a change. Because I can fast, and I will be the same person from 5:20 in the morning that the Ta'anit began, till 8:40, so to speak, like the Ta'anit ends. And you can sleep all day and khalas, and there is nothing else to do. But we are people who believe in Hashem. We are people that believe in our Hachamim, and we believe in our Torah. Ta'anit is about changing. Whatever it may be, I spoke about this topic because this was the menu that the Zohar Kadosh mentioned, so to speak. For example, just to finish with something positive, the Sefer Hasidim talks about praying for a good wife, which we all love our wives, and we are, Baruch Hashem, happy with what God gave us. But it says, for that to happen, prayer, it's required. That's part one of the process. Pray that Hashem should send you the proper spouse, the right one for you. Because at the end of the day, the neshamot, they need to become soulmate. And then we calibrate the neshama through our deeds until her deeds and his deeds become a supplement for each other, and that is the sanctity and holiness of marriage. And if Be'ezat Hashem, a person is already happy, is already married rather, and happiness and marriage, the Talmud writes in Masechet Berachot that they are connected one-on-one, they are connected one-on-one. So therefore the Gemara writes that the concept of marriage and the concept of happiness and the concept of praying for marriage, it's a mandatory requirement. Mandatory in what sense? Maintenance, so to speak. In other words, you got married, you have a whole beautiful. But then what happens the day after? So the Musar of today tells us the importance of maintenance. Maintenance, I like to clarify, it doesn't mean high maintenance, the way people say out there, or how of a luxurious or an expensive lifestyle the person may have, which is not the time for today. Today, tighten the belt, be cautious, be careful, and pray that Be'ezat Hashem things will get better and better. But the maintenance that we are referring to is of working on our marriage constantly. And the power of the mouth in a marriage, and I'm not talking in a physical way, you don't need me to tell you that, but I'm talking about in a verbal communication. Sometimes people tell me, Rabbi, we don't communicate with my spouse. He says, why not? Because we fight all day. And why we fight? Because he screams. And why he screams? Because she curses. And why she curses? Because he criticizes her. So it's like a merry-go-round. In Spanish, they call calecita. With that kind of mindset and attitude, for sure you're not going to have a happy marriage. And therefore, the Musar of today says that a person must pray to the Almighty for a good wife, Be'ezat Hashem, for a good husband, because it takes two to tango at the end of the day. And Be'ezat Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives the person their soulmate. Now you may say, but Rabbi, how could it be soulmate if they got divorced? So then your question will be, why they got divorced? What happened in the marriage? If they were able to get married, and they were married according to our Torah, according to the Hachamim, everything proper by the book and by our Torah, so what failed? Don't blame the ketubah. Don't blame the caterer. The issue must be between them. And that's why there's so much, it's written against the topic of getting divorced, to avoid it as much as you can, unless, God forbid, certain situations may develop. Now, the Musar of today goes on and discusses additional concept of marriage, and it says that the wives do have a great power to help the husband grow. Like we find the opposite. For example, the wife of Korah was the one that she actually started to pick on him, and that led to the tragedy of Korah and his family. Yet the wife of On Ben Pelet, she encouraged her husband, and she made the husband understand that for him trying to make a move was a recipe for disaster. And this is how On's wife saved On's life. With that being said, let us hope and pray, Be'ezat Hashem, that this Ta'anit of 17 of Tammuz reverses itself to be a day of happiness and joy for Am Israel. And even if Haz v'Shalom, we still are in exile by the end of the day, definitely trying to apply to our daily life the powerful and strong lessons of the Zohar of today and some of the messages of the Musar of today to enhance our life, to make our life a meaningful life, a happier life, a holier life, and a life that Be'ezat Hashem, we have the roadway traced to a certain extent to connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to our self-improvement as individuals and in our relation between Ben Adam la Havero. I'd like to wish everybody to have an easy and meaningful fast. Have a great day. Shalom uvracha tova.